Hey everybody, I'm Michael, and we're going to be starting off at Joshua 6 and 7 today. Um, Maybe what might be worth touching on just for a second is the previous three verses. At the end of chapter 5, there's the fall of Jericho. It says, "Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, 'Are you for us or for our enemies?' 'Neither,' he replied, 'but as a commander of the army of the Lord, I now come.'" I just think it's pretty obvious in some ways why that's such an essential thing for us to concentrate on. Almost more for our day and age that is so polarized politically and everything else. It's so easy for us to want God to be on our side, and I think in certain instances, depending on how we're talking about it, we can say that God is on our side. But there are lots of moments, and this is definitely one of them, where God makes it clear that God is not on anybody's side. God's on God's side. And I just think that that's so encouraging in a bizarre way. It's also a very sobering idea, right? Because you want to make sure you're on God's side and not. I want to make sure I'm on God's side and not like skewed one way or another. You know, it's so easy for us to get caught up in our own emotions or our own desires, our own biases. But in the end, God is the one who sees perfectly. Yeah, I just thought I would start there. I guess we could read to the end of that chapter. It says, "The commander of the Lord's army then said, 'Take off your sandals, for the place you are standing on is holy.' And Joshua did so." And once again, I think that shows like how important it is and how seriously God takes that stance. You know, it's like Joshua, you're an amazing warrior, you're an amazing man, but in the end of the day, you don't even know the ground you're standing on, buddy. And that's true for us too. In a very odd way, I think that can energize us if we come to him humbly and we ask for him to show us the way, which I think in Joshua's way, he did that. Like, of course he wants God on his side, right? That's understandable. God himself understands that probably, right? But in the end, God's making it clear that his thoughts are not Joshua's thoughts or my thoughts or your thoughts. And anyway, Lord, thank you for Joshua 6 and 7. We're going to plunge into today, and I pray that you'd encourage anybody who hears. In your name, amen. All right, now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out, and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the whole of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in." So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it, and he ordered the army, "Advance! March around the city with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord." When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the army, "Do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout." So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests, carrying the 7 trumpets, went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord, while the trumpet kept sounding. So on the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to camp. They did this for 6 days. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priests sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout! For the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble upon it. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and the iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into the treasury." When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. And Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring her out, and all who belong to her, in accordance with your oath to her." So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her. I bet she packed him in, huh? They brought out her entire family and put them in the place of the camp of Israel. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it. But they put the silver and the gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasure of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. Excuse me. At that time Joshua pronounced this solemn oath: "Cursed be before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn he will lay its foundations, and at the cost of his youngest he will set up its gates." I think it's almost a shame, because Jericho is such a cool sounding city. That word is kind of a beautiful word, I think, but there's the curse. A curse to rebuild the city. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. All right, so what are the three questions that we major on? What is being said, how is it being said, and why is it being said that way, right? And we don't know exactly why God was so merciless to Jericho. We don't know if that was God just testing Israel for obedience. We don't understand ancient culture on how routine this type of a raid was, right? We don't understand lots of things here, but it's clear this was the instruction, and I just don't think it's I don't think it's important to find a really elaborate explanation about a lot of things. I think it is important to wrestle with the text, and there are some people who read this and won't bat an eye because maybe they're history buffs, right? There's other people who might be more empathetic and sensitive, and that's a beautiful thing. And when we read that all the young and old, the men and the women were taken out, that's a hard thing for us to stomach, especially today in the States, that we're so used to peace comparatively to other regions of the world, right? So if you're struggling with that stuff, go ahead and struggle with it. Don't feel like you have to find an answer, and especially if you're given an answer that doesn't really please you, I encourage you to reject it and to just bring it to the Lord and keep bringing it to the Lord. And that might seem audacious, but that's honestly my best advice. So, chapter 7, Achan's sin. This is also going to be a little bit hard for some people to take. I mean, there's something truly miraculous about the Battle of Jericho too, right? We got to remember that Israel was in bondage for 400 years, right? And then in all of their exhaustion and frustration and everything else, they were brought out of that, and then for 40 more years at least, they were wandering in the wilderness, and now they've made their first real invasion, and they've won, and it wasn't by their own hand, right? There's also a plus side to this whole thing. Just imagine the shock that Israel must have felt to win a battle in such an unorthodox way, and probably the reminder they got that, oh yeah, a lot of our dad or our mom or our grandparents who were there for the Exodus. There's a lot of people who probably were born who weren't around during the Exodus. They're kind of reminded that that same God is with them now, right? And that's, after all the dust is settled, that's probably a shocking and a bizarrely comforting thing for them to feel. Even after God has assured Joshua that he's on no one's side, right? He's on his side. Nevertheless, Israel was given this amazing victory, right? And what an amazing thing for them to experience. Chapter 7. But now remember, there was those devoted things that they were cautioned not to take, right? No gold, no iron, no bronze, right? No silver. But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. And there you go. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them, so the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Now, and this is just another example that God's not on anybody's side, right? He's on his side. Yeah. Anyway, now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, to the east of Bethel, and told them, "Go up and spy out the region." So the men went up and spied out Ai. And so now they're spying out Ai like they spied out Jericho. When they returned to Joshua, they said, "Not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it. Do not weary the whole army, for only a few people lived there." So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. And they chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the stone quarries, and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. And then Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. And Joshua said, "Alas, Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? The Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. What then will you do with your great name?" The Lord, this part's funny. The Lord said to Joshua, "Stand up. What are you doing on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant which I commanded them to keep. They've taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them with their own possessions. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies." And it is funny, like, how many times have I done something like that where I think I'm being very pious, right? And I get down on my knees, or I might get on my knees a lot of times in one day, or over the course of a month or something. And God's not impressed by that at all. God's like, actually, get up. Like, this is what happened, and make it right, you know? And that almost kind of sounds like, sort of I don't want to say a strict father, but like one of those dads that's just a plain and simple dad who's going to tell you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not, you know, whether it's popular or not. The dad just says it, right? And that's what God is doing here with Joshua. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies, and they turn their backs, and that is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They turn their backs and run because they have been made liable to destruction. I will not be with you any more unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. Go, consecrate the people. Tell them, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There are devoted things among you, Israel. You cannot stand against your enemies until you remove them. In the morning, present yourselves tribe by tribe. The tribe the Lord chooses shall come forward clan by clan. The clan the Lord chooses shall go forward family by family. The family the Lord chooses shall come forward man by man, and whoever is caught with the devoted things shall be destroyed by fire, along with all that belongs to him. He has violated the covenant of the Lord and has done an outrageous thing in Israel. Early the next morning, Joshua had Israel come forward by tribes, and Judah was chosen. The clans of Judah came forward, and the Zerahites were chosen. He had the clan of the Zerahites come forward by families, and Zimri was chosen. Joshua had his family come forward man by man, and Achan, son of Camri, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah was chosen. And then Joshua said to Achan, "My son, give glory to God, the God of Israel, and honor him. Tell him what you have done. Do not hide it from me." And Achan replied, "It is true, I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done. When I saw in the plunder a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath." So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and there it was, hidden in his tent with the silver underneath. And they took the things from the tent, brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua, together with all of Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the gold bars, his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, and all he had, the valley of Acre. Joshua said, "Why have you brought this trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today." Then all of Israel stoned him, and after that they stoned the rest. They buried him. Over Achan they heaped a large pile of rocks, which remains to this day. Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger. Therefore, the place has been called the Valley of Acre ever since. And there's a chapter later that we're going to read that like Israel remembers this day, right? Remembers this passage like you're going to remember it, with all the discomfort with it. And they say, "Remember Achan, like it wasn't just him who died for his sin," right? Like sin very often, if not always, has rippling effects to other people, and even when we think it won't. Yeah, I think once again struggle away with that chapter, but I think I just sensed today as I kind of reread this that it was time to read this passage with more confidence. And it's not because I understand it either, but it's because in my own life, I'm just sharing my own personal story now, that I'm really, I'm somebody who struggles with lots of anxiety and depression, and I think many times the reason for that is I heap too much expectation on myself to understand everything. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to struggle, because that's just who I am. I'm going to wrestle with things all the time. But I am working hard in my own life to heap all of my burdens on God and believe Him for His goodness. And what I see here is a grand arc where God is cleansing His people. And He's keeping His promises that go all the way back to Abraham and to Moses. And it can be hard sometimes, but it is good. Lord, thank you for this quick time in Joshua 6 and 7. And we designate our lives to you, Lord. Please show us when we have given devoted things to the wrong, when we've held back our lives as devoted things. We've held back from you. And yeah, wish you guys well. Lord, bless everybody who's listened to this, and help us to keep our eyes on you. All right, catch you guys on the next one.